What's going on, guys? Welcome back. In our last video, we went over how to fetch our comments, display them, fetch the user data associated with them, and really just clean up the functionality of this comments view. There is just a couple more pieces of functionality we need to introduce, but that's going to require us to refactor some code in other places in the app, which is why I left this for a separate video. So we need access to our currently logged in user, and we want this sort of like global access to it, right? Where we can access our currently logged in user from anywhere in the application. So we can do things like inserting a comment with user data right away. And we're going to be using that in other places in the app as well, where we, one of them being right here, where we need access to our currently logged in user so that we can display their profile image right here in this sort of input view. So this is going to help us out in a lot of other places in the application. So guys, let's go to our user service, and we are going to structure this as a class very similar to what we did with our authentication service. So if I go to my auth service, you guys see here that we utilize this like shared instance, and we're using the current user on the auth service, but I don't like the architecture of that. I want us to do a refactor to refactor this to our user service. The auth service should really just be responsible for our user authentication. Everything else related to the user should be refactored out to our user service. So let's go ahead and just cut this, guys, from our auth service, go back to our user service and paste this in here. We need to make this a class, so make sure you guys make this a class. You can't have published properties on a struct. It requires class functionality. And then we are going to also introduce a shared instance here. So I'm going to say static let shared equal our user service. And the reasoning behind this is exactly the same as it was for our authentication service, guys. And I'm not going to go over that again. I did a detailed breakdown earlier in the course with diagrams and all that fancy stuff as to how this static functionality works and why we need to use it. So if you're confused about that, I highly recommend going back and checking that out when we did the explanation on the auth service. The concept is exactly the same. So you guys are going to notice that I think this is going to cause some errors, right? So if we try to build our project, so this all needs to be refactored to our user service. So we need to introduce a function to fetch our current user on the user service and sort of refactor this stuff to that. So that's where we're going to be going with this now. So guys, I'm going to write a function here to fetch our currently logged in user. So I'm going to say main actor func fetch current user. And it's going to be async throws. We're going to say guard let uid equal auth.auth.current user.uid else return. And we are going to say self.current user. I'm pretty sure we can just get this done in one line of code, guys, equals try await firestore.firestore.collection users.document uid.get document, and we're going to say get document as, guys. So user.self. So this gets the document and immediately just takes the data and maps it into that user object, and we're going to store it in that property here. And I'm just going to do my indenting to make this cleaner. So pretty simple function, right? Now we can see how we can call this function back in our auth service and all that stuff. And guys, basically this is going to give us access to our currently logged in user through this shared instance anywhere we want in the application. So back in our auth service, we no longer have self.current user. All we need to do now is say try await user service. Make sure you say .shared.fetch current user. So that's how we're going to load our user data. Here, when we sign out, we now have to replace this with user service .shared.current user equals nil. So when we sign out, we just wipe out that object from our current user object on the user service. And let's see. Here, when we upload our user data, we can literally just say user service shared.current user equals that user right there. So I'm pretty sure that if we build our code now, okay, we're still failing. Guys, a lot of you ask me about this error, no type named user in module Firebase auth. This is what's known as like a ghost error or a pseudo error. Your project will still build and run with this error. It's really just an issue with either Firebase or Xcode. It's not our problem to solve. I don't know why it shows up as an error, but your code will literally still build and run. Okay, so the only error that we have to actually fix is inside of our content view model, right? So here we're utilizing this auth service to look at our current user object. All we need to do now is say UserService.shared.current-user.sync weak self blah 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 blah. So we're just we're doing the same thing with the subscriber functionality. We're just using a different service to do it now. And once again, guys, I think this architecture is a bit cleaner. It really just creates more modular code and makes sure certain services are only responsible for certain things. Like our auth service kind of had a lot of stuff associated with it, and we really just extracted the functionality that we needed to the user service to sort of lighten up this auth service here. You never want one component of your code to be responsible for too many things. So that's a really nice cleanup there. Let's go ahead and run our code. I think it's going to build and run here. Yep, build succeeded. So you guys will notice that even though it was complaining about this being an error, it's not actually an error, which is weird. So our comments are still looking good. Now, guys, we're going to see how we can access our currently logged in user to utilize it in our comments view. So let's go back to our comments view here. And the first thing we're going to do is replace this with our circular profile image view with this mock user. We can just use that user service shared user, guys. So we can go up here and say private var current user, which is an optional user, return user service.shared.current user. And then literally just go ahead and pass in current user right there. So let's go ahead and run this and see if that's working. So we should get our currently logged in user's profile image coming back in that now. And if we click on that, boom, we can see our currently logged in user's profile image showing up. So our user service refactor is working really nicely, guys. And that just shows you how you can have access to your currently logged in user anywhere in the application in a safe way, right? We didn't make it like a nasty global property. It's being handled through a shared static instance, and we get access to it just like that. So I think we're actually going to wrap this video up here, guys. Our user service refactor is looking really good. And I think our functionality in our comments view model is just fine, right? After we upload a comment, it's perfectly okay to just execute this fetch comments function. Both methods we talked about have their benefits and their drawbacks, right? So inserting the comment manually has its own drawbacks, and fetching it from the refetching everything from the database also has its own drawbacks and benefits. And this is totally fine to do. But basically, guys, if you did want to insert that, you could simply just say, self.comments.insert comment at 0, and then you could say self.comments 0.user equals user service dot shared dot current user. And this insert operation is somewhat expensive from a computation side. If you guys had like 50 comments loaded and you insert one at the 0 index, it has to push all of the other comments back 1 index. So this has its own drawbacks, like I stated as well, but that's how you would do sort of the other method there, guys, if you guys wanted to do that. So we're just going to leave this as is, and I think that's perfectly fine. So that's going to wrap it up for our comments functionality, guys. The only thing we're going to introduce a little bit later on when we do like another refactor is this timestamp label, and we're going to take care of that with our posts as well. And we might take care of that in the next video. Other than that, next up, what we're going to be getting into, guys, is actually going over how to follow and unfollow users so that we can ultimately get posts coming back from people that we follow. Right now, our user feed is only going to be like, it's a global feed, really. All the posts in our app are going to show up in every user's feed. We want to build a more tailored social media experience, and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to do that with this follow and unfollow functionality, which we're going to be handling in the next section. So get excited for that, guys. We'll see you there. Peace.